you. Good afternoon. My name is Suhanya Mukherjee, not the designer one. Heading this institute, this beautiful institute for 18 years, 1-8. And it's a joy. And this is one of the few museums, or probably the museum in the country, managed and maintained by the people, for the people. For many years, people looked at this museum as a traditional museum, but over the years, museum is changing, museum landscape is changing everywhere. And I was very fortunate to participate sometime in 2008 or 9 when M Plus was conceived. So I was invited and I was there. And that time we understood the ambition that we all looked at very ambitious project. And it is now on the surface. And our nephews, they are all from Hong Kong. I know how, for different reasons, we are on the Bizot group. It's a group of American and European museums directors. We are, 2 or 3 people from Asia. So she is there, and our friend, in Singapore Museum, he is also there. This is a children's museum that I must, remind you. And it's a beautiful children's space. And this space was created in 2019. This is the only children's space in the city of 23 villages. And the museum is creating space for everyone. We have Jahangir and Nicolsal Art Gallery that was added in 2009. Many of you did art intervention in some of our permanent galleries. We have a proposal already submitted to the government, creating much bigger space in one of the lands already demarcated as part of centenary project for modern and contemporary art. We are just waiting for the approval. So things are changing, and thank you for organizing this Mumbai Gallery Week event. I think last year also, thanks to Sirin and the organizer for Tang, yeah. And thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. Thank you, Pooja. And it's become a spot for us. It's like a picnic spot because we have lunch after that. So I really, really value that you give us a space for Mumbai Gallery Weekend. It's really an integration between the gallery and the museum. And I grew up at Jahangir Art Gallery, and many of us, who are part of the art scene, we barely ever came to the museum growing up. He doesn't speak very well of me. But since you come, Mr. Mukherjee, you're literally here every week. So your programming is just so brilliant. Bombay will speak for the fact that we are at the museum very, very, very often. So thank you. I just wanted to introduce our fantastic panel here. We have Suhanya Raffel from N Plus Museum. Suhanya has a very, very, very old history. We are actually, some of us are 30 years friendship with Suhanya. It is our 30th year, 1995 is when we started. And we've done so much in different, so Suhanya from Queensland Art Gallery to Art Gallery at New South Wales, and now heading Asia's biggest museum. I think one of the world's, one of the greatest museums. So those who know her for the last 30 years, she's immensely proud of you. So it's so wonderful to have you here. Thank you. With that, we have Billy Tang, who is the youngest member here, but heads the oldest institution one of the oldest institutions in Hong Kong, wonderfully, Kunsthalle kind of space called Parasite, where we are always at during Art Basel Hong Kong, and does amazing things. So Billy is new to Parasite at how many years? 2 years. But moved from private gallery space to to a public institution, and he have Ingrid from Tai Kwun, ex-prison, which is now converted into this, as Hong Kong does, makes, nothing into amazing, prisons into this amazing space. So I'm not going to say so much because really the presentation is about that. And last but absolutely not the least is our favorite Adeline. Adeline is a real friend of the galleries. She was the head of Art Bars in Hong Kong. She's just, I know Adeline has many, many special friends, but I can say with conviction that Bombay Dandies and Bombay is really her beat, and she comes on her own. And thank you so much, Adeline, and giving thoughts there. So without much ado, I hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. Before we start, I also wanted to say thank you, Mumbai Gallery Weekend, for bringing us all together, because actually we all live in Hong Kong, but I don't remember the last time we actually got together and actually spoke together as a panel. Never, in fact. So this is a very rare opportunity for all of us to be here with you. And can I just say how excited I am for you here in Mumbai, having attended a number of editions of Mumbai Gallery Weekend and watching you grow from strength to strength, and just watching the audience develop, and the fact that now, certain galleries are like clubs you can't even get in because there's so many people in there during opening night, which is just, it's really just, it gives me so much hope that, that the art world here is going to continue to develop and to grow from strength to strength. So on that one, I say more power to you, and amazing that now there are, you started with 7 galleries and now there are 35 for the weekend. So yeah, can't be happier. So okay, some housekeeping. This is a 90-minute talk. Initially we had planned for 60 minutes of panel presentation and 30 minutes for questions and answers, but I wanted to also make this special for everyone, because the whole point here is really to share with you what's going on in Hong Kong, to present to you differing models of non-profit institutions, from artist-run spaces to our flagship museum, and a very interesting unique heritage project which also incorporates contemporary art. So I think if you think about it, Hong Kong is 7.5 million in terms of population compared to Bombay. We are, just some fun facts, over 1,000 square kilometers of territory. We're the 4th most densely populated, territories in the world. Apparently, India is 185 times larger than Hong Kong. So, on that note, I think when you think about cultural institutions in Hong Kong, it's almost like a question mark. And if you think about it just really purely from like a Wikipedia standpoint, like how does this work, right? And also I think most of us see Hong Kong as a financial center. You think of, trading, wheeling, dealing, East meets West. But I think even for me, I'm originally from Malaysia, and when I arrived in Hong Kong 10 over years ago, during the Art Barber show, of course. But I think one of the things that struck me the most and touched me the most was the non-profit institutions and also the art community. Because with all the facts that I just presented to you, it almost feels like there is no hope for anything that is artist-run, that is from the ground up. And, and I think one of the most fascinating and moving experiences for me today, up until today, and to call Hong Kong home, is to see how our institutions have grown. I think, I am in my late 40s, and I never thought that in my lifetime I would be witnessing 2 museums built in my generation, my time. Because when we think about museums, we think 100-year-old institutions, we think, hallowed legacies and all. But here, 3 different models, and also so proud, particularly with M+, our flagship museum in Hong Kong, but not only in Hong Kong, but also for all of us in Asia. First time in your life that you are not a footnote in someone's exhibition, you are front and center, and we see ourselves pictured in this museum. So I think what we're going to start with is a bit of what I call the Marvel origin story. And I think, as I said before, it is that, may I get a show of hands of how many of you who have been back to Hong Kong since the pandemic and have been to the institutions? Okay. Thank you. Hi. Hello, latecomers. Okay, thank you very much. I think with that, I would like to start perhaps with the order as I said. So I think we'll take it from the oldest, which is Parasite, which is going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary, Billy?
Yeah, we're at the moment we're 28 years, and so my name is Billy Tang, executive director and curator of Parasite. It's one of the oldest art institutions in Hong Kong, but also perhaps in the region. We represent a model within this context of the panel today, or something that evolved through a very grassroots context. We were founded in 1996, during just before the handover period. And we were founded by 7 artists. Speaking of youth, and this contradiction of being the oldest now, they were in their 20s mostly as well. It really started without the vision of being a long-term institution. It was actually an exhibition for a few months, and since then we've shape-shifted across 3 locations on Hong Kong Island. We primarily provide an experimental space now for artists and curators. And yeah, this is kind of my introductory for today, just to give the context.
Thank you, and Mick Mahani. Tell me a little bit about NPAS. Yes. So I'm the youngest institution because Tai Kwun opened before NPAS did. On one hand, to the public, but on the other hand, took a long time in gestation. The whole of the West Kowloon Council District project on which NPAS sits. It's 40 hectares of land, prime real estate, right on the Hong Kong Harbour, Victoria Harbour, that was set aside for cultural development at the time of handover from the British to the PRC, the Chinese. And the then chief executive of Hong Kong said, we need to build museums to know who we are. And this was a very important statement about the function of civic institutions in terms of what they mean to people and communities. And the recognition then, in 97, 98, that this is what they wanted to do. But it took many years, which included 3 years of public consultation with the people of Hong Kong to say, well, what kind of museums do we need? And at the time, the people said they wanted 4 different museums, one for design, one for moving images, one for arts, and one for ink arts. And the museum advisory group, chaired by Victor Low, who then became my first museum board chairman, trustee, they decided to advise the authority, Cultural District Authority, not to build 4 little museums, but one big one for the 21st century that would encompass these disciplines. But the advisory committee couldn't decide what to call the museum. They kept arguing about the title because they did not want to use the word modern and contemporary, which they felt was too labored and weighted to European canonical understandings of art histories. This is a new world with the 21st century possibilities. It had to be more than just a museum like that. And there was a designer, Hong Kong designer Freeman Lau, on that committee. They'd written a very wonderful report that is available still for all of you to read online. It's the visionary statement for the museum that we still use. But Freeman was asked by Victor to say, look, we can't decide on a title, forget about a title, just put a placeholder graphic. And it was Freeman who came up with N for museum, class for more, as placeholder, that then became who we are. It never changed. It was the best decision because, of course, the plus allows us to roam far and wide. It allows us to think beyond what we even think about now into the future. And with that, in 2006, the government of Hong Kong gave over a grant, an endowment that translates to be $3 billion plus 40 hectares of land. And then walked away, if you like. There's no more intervention in terms of finances, and the museum was built and opened now 3 years.
And last but not least, Ingrid. Well, can everyone hear me? Okay, great. I guess within the Hong Kong art ecosystem, Tai Kwun is a little child. But I do think that we had the honor of being the oldest in terms of the facilities and the buildings and the heritage sites that we used to create what now know as, we like to call the beating cultural heart because of central and hopefully a larger area of Hong Kong, because we in fact are located in the center of the what we call the island side of Hong Kong island. And I work for the Contemporary Art Center, which is called Tai Kwun Contemporary, but it's housed within a much larger culture and heritage complex called Tai Kwun, which translates to big station. And what it is a I guess a trifecta of the three main buildings, which consist of and it's a one-stop shop. There's the central police station, and then there was the central magistracy, which is the courts, and then there was the prison. So in fact, this was a site where had to take place. And then I guess also pre-97 and 95, they were then by the Hong Kong government charged to become declared monuments. And then throughout the years, it became Other Goods Day, which is we're very proud a UNESCO awarded revitalization project. The heritage side is they do exhibitions around that heritage of the prison, around the stories. Actually, the prisoners, prisoners is in many great projects around that. The discipline on food and culture, because now, like many former colonial structures, is being transformed into a place for families and for also, I think, people coming to see the arts. Yeah, so restaurants, whatever, what have you. And then on our side, that's the parade ground, and then the other side, which is the prison yard, is where one of two new buildings were built by Herzog and Indiram. One is ours, Tai Kwun Contemporary, which we do experimental, I would say, art programming, often commission-based. I think we like to focus often on solo presentations, or if they're group exhibitions, then they're quite, we hopefully feel like they're important in terms of what they contribute to the dialogue about the region and what we're trying to say for artists. And then there's also a new building that's also the auditorium, which we at times use. We have a public art program, we have a publishing program, and I focus a lot on what's called the artist book library, which hints at pre-institutions, how artists worked to create more what they could using publications, visiting sound art scene, etc. So that, if it did a quick introduction, overview about Tai Kwun and then Tai Kwun Contemporary.
I think whenever we think about public institutions or non-profit institutions, often we think about first of all, who do we serve? Who is our audience? And I think what could be interesting here, perhaps, if you could all share with us, your mandate. How did you come up with your structure as to how do you even approach this? Because it could be for all, but I think we also need to start with some sort of direction, right? Anyone? Billy?
Yeah, I guess it's really shifted, I would say, for the history of Parasite, in terms of we were artist-led. And I think what's marked our history has been a kind of pivot orientation from artist-led to curatorial-driven program. And I think it really came from a place when we think about the ecosystem, what is missing or what is useful even. So I mentioned that it was founded by artists, and it really came from a lack of an experimental exhibition space. Normally the places that you could show tended to be quite bureaucratic, controlled. You could only use a wall space. You couldn't, and for installation artists particularly, I think it was, in some ways frustrating. So hence, first an exhibition that they took with their own initiative. And then I think what was very special at one point through, after a decade or so of working in this operation, where it came from moving from funding to grants, perhaps small scale, accumulating into something a bit more sustainable. They reached a crossroads, and I think they also decided at one point that another lack that was needed to be taken into consideration was a lack for curators as well to express themselves. There was a lack of education spaces as well. There was not at the time, a lack of curatorial programs, for example. So everything was from that self-initiative of like an exhibition being the engine to drive things. And they decided to relinquish the control and and to pass on the custodianship to curators as well, which has led to all sorts of other things now as well, and including relocation of another space. So yeah, it's kind of.
But I mean, it's just beyond. I think what Parasite does is also just beyond the exhibitions, right? I mean, I think there have been also a number of other educational programs. Perhaps you might want to tell us a little bit more about what you've done.
Yeah, and so in terms of the audience, I think we've kind of had to improvise. We tend to occupy spaces that previously, I think when we first began, we were in the shop front, a very small space, but we were always trying to punch above our weight. And then in 2015, we moved to industrial space. This also leads to these sets of questions. We became, from the shop front, where we were very accessible to a public, an accidental audience in some ways, who were kind of be curious, walk into the space and learn in this way. We moved in an industrial situation on the top floor, and that's really kind of, in a way, how we draw people to our space. And as you mentioned, the education program being a key part of that was we don't have the natural football. Hundreds of people coming through our doors, and so with that in mind, we decided to be much more targeted with our outreach, to bring audiences and to craft the program or projects that we do, and education projects to bring different kind of demographics. So from university students, we also think in Hong Kong not as a homogeneous block. The geography is also very complex. The politics as well, or the divide or the price division between Hong Kong Island and Kowloon Peninsula, also the outlying islands, in fact, it's something that we're always trying to be creative with as well. So actually, a lot of our education programs take place outside of our physical space. The physical space is a laboratory for ideas, and we're trying to be very fluid in terms of this kind of movement and connection of how we engage.
But what also about, you spoke about Hong Kong, but where this, in terms of engagement with practitioners, artists, is it Hong Kong only, or what is the scope in terms of working with artists from beyond?
Yeah, I think we've always tried to see what is kind of maybe a miss from the dominant discourse. How can we disrupt or kind of introduce new ways of thinking? And that's definitely like embracing this kind of like fluid idea of place and identity that I think is also speaks a lot of the cultural resilience and the cross-pollination of and it kind of really steeped in the history of Hong Kong. So that makes it a very special place. So sorry, what was the question?
No, I think where do we situate ourselves in a sense, I think we're all Hong Kong institutions, and again it's about who do we serve and how do we engage, right? So is it a predominantly Hong Kong artist program? How do we work with the rest of our region, our territories, and by?
Yeah, I think in some ways we're trying to be fluid between what is considered local, and that already is a complex set of questions in terms of the immediate milieu that we're in, and also the kind of distances involved within the city as well. Also within the context of Asia as a region, that's a very kind of porous concept in that sense, and that's for us is really it's a doorway to work within that context, and what is considered other constellations outside as well. But I guess in a way we're also trying to think a lot about pivoting away from traditional centers of art and to challenge this in terms of geographic kind of connection. So one of our current exhibitions, for example, is bringing together conversations of Latin American age together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking this also in a way it's to lead into Suhanya and Fas and tell us a little bit more.
So it's very important question about location because NPAS is located on the Kowloon side, not on Hong Kong Island side. And Hong Kong Island has a very particular spirit to it, very wonderful state. But Kowloon, of course, Kowloon side is where the vast majority of Hong Kongers live. So the siting of a major institution, and there are two museums of West Kowloon, the Palace, Hong Kong Palace Museum, and INCRAS, a deliberate decision about facing to community. Now, the museum opened 3 years ago, and our audience right now, my 2024 audience was 2.6 million people. So it is extraordinary, given the size of Hong Kong, there's over 7.5 million. 40% of my audience is Hong Kong, and 60% is beyond Hong Kong. What do I mean by that? Right now, post-COVID, 40% of that 60% is mainland and mostly Greater Bay, and 20% from fundamentally Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Thailand, Southeast Asia. So it's Asia. Europe, North America, not yet coming back. Let's see whether they come back.
I mean, in terms of like programming and thinking about programming around M+, I mean, I always remember, the M+, which is more than a building. More than a building, but also if you think about it, M+ has been operating even before the building came along, and I think this is a very unique model. Maybe perhaps, yes. And so it was one of the biggest challenges was about building many things. Building the collections, building a professional staff, building an audience, building the building, all at the same time. So I've been at M+ for 8 years. 3 of those reopened. The 5 years prior to that was building all of that at the same time. My staff used to say it's like riding the bicycle while putting it together. And we did a huge amount of training as well because we have to build capacity. We also had, very important kind of spirit diets, and being more than a building was one of them, which meant we're not going to be affected by not having a building. In fact, it was a liberation. So you were able to go out. Everybody had a very inside out almost, right? You started with the content and then
And we also decided that the digital was very important. We invested heavily on the digital platform, and we reached, I think, over 98 million people to digital work because the region is so digitally alert. We know that. We know how active people are on hand.
And also, I mean, and for you, Ingrid, I mean, if you think about Tai Kwun, it's a very, it's so unique in its proposition because I think for me, the audience in Tai Kwun is everyone from our grandmothers to tourists. And I think also the historical aspect of Tai Kwun. Older generations know it as a police station. They think of it as a prison yard. Literally it was an active space up until a certain point. And so, I mean, how in terms of the programming once more, like how do you balance being that, the consumptive program also along with the rest of the cultural, the wider cultural composition? Breeze.
Thank you for that question, and good to hear from also my colleagues here. I should say that we are a non-collecting institution. Except for the library, we do collect and buy books to support artists who work in publishing. But it started out, I think it was taking different models. But it was always not only, I think, to welcome vast amounts of ranges of audience, which is one reason actually I think for working there and just seeing that kind of scenographic and having art reach many different kinds of people. But the original idea was to work also in collaboration with the people that had already been working there.
with scholars, the curators who would then come and be our guest curators. We didn't start out with a curatorial program. And so we would partner with the people that had done the work, that were already doing scholarship, that had been putting shows together, and to work with them to partner where they could come in and think of the show, or we would work together to create it. Then eventually, I think as things go, eventually up until this point, you now do have a multi-pronged curatorial team. We started with Tobias Berger, who was our founding head of art. Then there's also the head of performance, the head of heritage, and they all work together to, I think, complement and also schedule, because everybody loves using the site in different ways, both indoors, but we also have public art, we also do performances, we all want, the beautiful auditorium. So I think it's more complementary in how they work together. I wouldn't say that we're like overlapping programming.
And also, I think with JC, with Tai Kwun Contemporary, everything is free to the public, correct?
Mostly free to the public, except sometimes with what we call, we don't call them blockbuster, but we call major exhibitions. One we did with Kipawati Risk, Hashi Murakami, and most recently Bruce Nauman. But I think the next one, which will be the first show by Anpuara since its death in 2014, I believe that will be free to the public. So it just depends. But we are supported by a charity called the Hong Kong Jockey Club, but it doesn't mean that that we're completely fully funded, but they have been supported in terms of, I think, allowing to build a team, for example, pay salaries, to have the right team in place for us to then share that with the public. And that's the last thing I'll say is this: I'm really proud of. I've been, I guess, technically there, not officially, since the beginnings. I remember the hard hat tours when it was being renovated. But working with the library, I think and that was also tethered to the history of building a knowledge base and writing around the practices that would also support contextualizing art in the deepen. And we started and had done 6 in-person book fairs that reached up to 7,000 people in a few days. And to bring, again, practitioners, to give them a place to show, a place to share, and a place to continue to have a career and to work.
Well, I just want to also say, we all provide very different ecological functions, if you like, and the cultural space of Hong Kong. And the other very important aspect of Hong Kong is how developed the commercial world is, and how highly developed it was before the museums came online. The auction market, the art fair, and much of education around audience was to that avenue. So I know that Art Basel, Sabadis Christie's was waiting for the museum to come, because the museum approaches the idea of what we value in a very different way. And this was a crucial and very significant part is the raison d'etre fine pass as well. Because in the museum, the collections are, you're valuing history, aesthetics, relationships. It's not about whether this costs $1 million, and that's what I've come to see. So this is in a city where the commercial development had become called in K.
Yeah, no, this is a very good point, because just to give you some background, Christie's and Sotheby's came to Hong Kong in 1997. Art Basel came circa 20. The first art fair at Hong Kong started around 2008, 2009. It eventually became Art Basel. So if you think about the progression of Hong Kong's art development, for the longest time I remember when we started Art Basel, the comment was, I had to take my child to an auction preview in order for them to be able to see art in person. So that in itself is a very inverse sort of beginning. So it started with auction previews, and then eventually with the Art Basel show, and also again with a very key attention to the public and development and making the art available to all. But nevertheless, you're not really seeing things in context. Until, it's true. The whole time when I was at Basel, I was like, come on, I can't wait for the museums to open to finally have that final piece in the jigsaw so that the picture is complete. And I do think that, with the public, as young institutions, how have you managed that? Because I think there's something that happens in your head as you're planning, and then there's also something that happens when you open in real life, and then, and then it belongs to everybody. So how do you balance that, and also, how do you continue?
So with the Impasse experience, we are a paid institution now. But the first year when we opened, and we opened in the middle of COVID in 21, the first year we decided it would be free to the public because it was such an intense period of discussion, of argument, of debate and challenge that the Impasse was going to be relevant in a Hong Kong situation. If you look at all of the journalism prior to the museum opening, there was this anxiety that the museum would be a white elephant. And they're a very large museum. We are physically 65,000 square meters. They're the same size as the Pompidou or the Museum of Modern Art with their expansion. So the ambition for Asia was intense. And the anxiety was that we needed to perform as well. So what was critical was to build a collection that was relevant to us, the Asia. So the priority was to, there's just that. And so the collections have blossomed. And then to open and be confident and certain. Opening in COVID was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life because Hong Kong just poured through the door. And the museum became the city's museum. And any doubt that anyone would have had that this was somehow not going to be enjoyed or embraced was put to bed. We opened for 2 months and then we had to close for 4 months because of Omicron coming in. But the first year was 8 months. We had 2 million people, all Hong Kong, 100% Hong Kong. By the second year, we knew the financials were such that we had to charge an entrance fee, and not a cheap entrance fee in terms of Hong Kong cultural institutions, which are generally free. So we charge, 160 Hong Kong dollars, and it has not stopped people coming. I think the other thing to say is it's a young audience. 84% of my audience is aged between 18 and 44.
It is fantastic.
And there is no question that they're coming to see for a new. The most important founding collection, this was the SIG collection of contemporary Chinese art, an avant-garde collection from the 70s, with over 1,500 works that were gifted to the museum. And that is a destination collection. But around that are many other things that we've run, and so people keep coming. The collection and what we do, the content, as Lily says, is what drives people and the audience. And I think the years of working with auction houses, the education that took place in different ways, even though it's not ideal, paid off. It paid off.
I had a question for Hattie Italy. I'm quite curious in terms of, could you say there was like a big difference that you shared with the audience, like pre-Art Zone, after Art Basel? What did it bring to the ecosystem? Did that, yeah.
Pre-Art Basel and after Art Basel. Sorry, what was your question?
In terms of what did it bring to the, did it have, this kind of...
Cultural desert. I mean, this is a very interesting thing. I think, if I think back to where we started in 2015, just thinking about the Art Basel programming, because I think in my time as the director for the Art Basel show in Hong Kong, I think one of the biggest aim was to bring audiences to Hong Kong, but to not keep you captive in the convention center. Meaning, apart from coming to see the galleries in the show floor, we also wanted you to experience Hong Kong for what it is, because I think otherwise you would never get a complete picture of the cultural development there. And if I think about then, 2015, sending people outside of the convention center, there was Parasite, there was Asia Art Archive. I think M Plus would have had a pavilion behind, and Cattle Depot. Yes, Cattle Depot. Tai Kwun was undergrads in construction. There was another private foundation for public called CHAP, the Center for Heritage Art and Textile. At the time, I would say quite slim pickings, yeah, compared to where we are today, where the program has blown up. If you think about the week, everyone is clamoring for space and attention because there's not only just, the institutions are reflected here. You have the Palace Museum now. You know, the Hong Kong Museum of Art has also reopened its doors. So in a way, I think in terms of audience and in terms of what is available, and it's grown. I mean, apart from the market development, of course, which is, I think in a way Hong Kong is seen as a sort of marketplace. I do feel that, the institutions have added another dimension altogether where it's almost a more balanced picture, if you will. I think we all think about how art, how much does this cost? What's the value of this? Blah, blah, blah. But there's nothing like seeing something in context because, not that I'm knocking Art Basel booths in any way, but when you're looking at, a booth presentation, it's almost like you're just seeing a sentence. Whereas if you go into a major, a more holistic approach, then you're reading something in a paragraph. You're understanding that deeper. So I hope I'm answering your question.
Sorry, I just turned that around because I think, Hong Kong as a city, I think it's a cliche descriptor of being between East and West. And we've also had these narratives kind of packed onto us that's really affected our work, I think. For example, pre-Art Basel, I think we were known as, quote-unquote, like cultural desert. But I think there was already existing at a time, glimmers, or if not, also, in full momentum, a rich ecosystem of non-profits. But what Art Basel, maybe perhaps what it did draw into the kind of equation was visibility from the rest of the world and the flow of people in the diversity, art professionals, our colleagues in the fields. This is something that really helps, from a non-profit perspective. We think a lot about auction houses and so forth, and commercial galleries, blue chips entering into the city. But, the other side of things, when the ecosystem of a non-profit, I think we also benefited from this as well. And in a way, questions in pretty honest, where the development might be going, to be critical of many things as well. And that's, I think, added to the richness of our city, that we can coexist in that way.
Well, certainly. I think we all have a place in the world. We all have our roles to play. And I think, it's all about how do we all exist in this ecosystem, right? I mean, sometimes there's always, some people see things in binaries. Oh, commercial, evil, non-profit, good. But the truth is, we can't survive without each other, right? And I think, how do we navigate that, in your role?
So I would also say that, the kind of public institutions, which is what we represent here, are critically important in terms of community health. It's an education, it's a leisure space, it's a place where you begin to value and reflect on the past and the future. It's an essential part of cultural ecology to have those institutions, whether they're collecting or not, whether they're experimental or not. This is a very, very significant part of growing the health and well-being of communities in relation to culture. And now, certainly during COVID, one of the big learning that we saw was how important the institution became for gathering, because you couldn't gather in so many other places that you could in the museum. And we are social, we need to be with each other and to also be still. But also the contemporary collections that we work with across design, architecture, moving image art, are vital ways of remembering who we are and why we need to look at that work. So,
is it?
Right. Wanted to quickly say to the earlier point about the importance of, I think, community enterprise within ecosystems. Early on, when I first came back to Hong Kong, which is 10 years ago now, I marveled at the fact that now we know collectors who are helping to support galas, helping to be on acquisition committees internationally to ensure that the representation in international collections. but within their own context of what, let's say their family business was, they were hosting amazing contemporary art, like previews of pioneers or giving curators an opportunity, including yourself, to do projects. And I think what I've always enjoyed, because it's something I recognize as a curator who does work in the nonprofit world, but I say to create platforms that meet the demands of which art and artists are shifting, that these people were all being the same, we're all being the same. And I think everyone's trying in their own way to meet the moment, and I think it helped evolve the ecosystem to where it was. And it's now the thickening where there's, several fairs. I would count the book there as a version of a fair where you look at it as providing a way to bring international exhibitors, yes, in the publication format, to like printed matter comes every year to create then platforms for distribution of artists that may not have that otherwise. So it's a smaller version of it against a commercial fair, but the emphasis is the same. And I've also personally done writing on evolving ecosystems, because I think it's also a critical element in the building of knowledge through like the archive and other ways, and just to get signal the people that aren't represented here at universities, the writers, the magazine makers, who are doing the work.
I think also Billy touched on it is that we are very conscious of the inter-regional when we think about the international. This is about the greater Asia and our histories, challenging as they are amongst ourselves, as much as it is about Europe and North America. So this is paraphrase and figurative.
So let's talk about, the elephant in the room, the challenges of operating as a non-profit or as a public museum space in Hong Kong. I mean, I'm sure we all read the news since 2019. And I think here, the question, I think, is really, what are your greatest challenges teaching every one of us as a different organization, and how are we overcoming it?
Sure. I guess if we could draw like one really important lesson from our 28 years of history, from grassroots to now being a kind of, in some ways, a more formal model of an institution, I would say we have developed an allergy of relying on one source of funding. So, I mean, we've been the trajectory of Parasite and how it managed to survive, often against many odds of the blocks of the city, the cultural space, and so forth, and the geopolitical share. We were self-funded. Then at one point we were 100% government funded. Now we're in a model where we have diversified. So we still have government funding. It's about 30%. And we have a patrons program, a membership program. And we also have something, a very important event called a fundraiser, a Ghana fundraiser. So it is probably about another 30% of our income. And that's enabled us to be agile. I still think our legacy is really to be reflexive of the model, to be able to shift and continue to do this, that. Another thing I would say is post-COVID, I think with all of our challenges, we're operating on the different modalities. I think, for me, the going into that process it's really setting it and kind of almost a curriculum for students or for professionals as well, to really collect and to reinforce narratives. There's the book fair of Tai Kwun as well, which I think is a really great gathering as well, global gathering of another ecosystem that's parallel to our world and essential. And for us, it's also to continue to ask these type of questions and then this model as well, perhaps. Yeah.
So for me, I need a big budget because we're a big institution. I have 200 full-time headcount and 300 others on contract and so on. So 500 people more or less. I have to self-fund 60% of my budget, which comes through ticketing. We do a lot of commercial work. We have a retail arm of the museum. We do events inside the museum as well with the restaurant in F&B. So it's a pretty typical major institutional fundraising model with big development around humanity and sponsorships. The other 50% comes from West Kowloon as a subvention. If you recall, the establishment of West Kowloon was with that $3 billion, which has been invested and burned. And so that's where I get my subvention from the West Kowloon Council District Board. But it is difficult, there's no question. I'm under intense pressure to move that middle from 50% to 70%. As a comparison, we are up there with the Tate, the Tate Modern, who also is able to bring that kind of income. But MoMA, all of them are bringing much less because they need less. They don't have the same pressures. They have wonderful big endowments and wealthier cities, or maybe wealthy. I mean, Hong Kong is a wealthy city, but philanthropy in Hong Kong for arts and culture is still very early days. People give to education and health. We have to persuade them to go to museum institution. So I spend a lot of time persuading people to hand over the cash.
But you also find like you have to persuade people to also believe in Hong Kong because given, I mean to all of us living there, I think Hong Kong's reputation has tarnished somewhat. So how do we, particularly Suhanya, and the most visible in demand?
I advocate for it. I always say the museum speaks for itself. You come and you look and you see, you will understand the value of what we do, the kinds of collections that we show, the integrity of that voice has not been diminished at all. And the argument in a very complex geopolitical moment is to argue precisely for that value, that Hong Kong can do what other places still cannot do.
I would also agree in some ways. In many ways, actually. I represent, I guess, the institution here, but I personally work a lot. The publishing, which just historically in itself, speaks for itself in terms of difficulties around the world, in terms of what it faces in terms of authorship, art exploits. So it's true, we have to sort of abide by laws that, are in place, but we're still here. And I was thinking about this earlier today. Even though I work for an institution, for the majority of my career, I built my own nonprofits to try to meet the demands of what I just think was missing in an organization. But I just mentioned that because I think with multiple decades, we bring some of those sometimes agility, flexible solutions within the institution that we can then apply to just, I think, keep the goals open. But there are some just practical things, like we're very proud of the fact that we've had 6 in-person theirs of in excess of 70,000 people, even during COVID, and that meant maybe the exhibitors were there, but we found a way to retain those relationships that we were trying to instill with local practitioners, because we were able to come up with what we call the printing program, but we were then continuing to match, with regional and international supporters, so that we could just continue to just keep going. And I think that agility to apply, I think, leverage our experience, to quite frank, to come up with some very practical, flexible solutions for whatever the situation, to meet the situation at hand.
This one of the things I wanted to add as well as part of the book fair, which I find incredibly beautiful, is it's this beautiful kind of chaotic energy that it brings. Normally, it's a very controlled exhibition, like most of the time of the year in the program, and then it's really this coming together from the bottom up that's really rare for an institution to be open towards.
Yeah, and then I think also truly what it's like without limitations, right? And walking around it and to see if you can push it as far as you can. And I mean, I think also it's always problem solving, right? and really kind of overcome that. Sorry, Billy, I clearly want to say something. Go on.
The elephant in the room. Or what is the elephant in the room?
Censorship.
It's censorship, right? And I don't think it's kind of I mean, from my view, a little bit of the frustration is it tends to come from one particular area of the world, you know, and it's kind of reductive narratives. I mean, I think, you know, there's always thresholds, and I think that's part of what drives our work in Parasite. And again, going back to how Parasite was founded, it was also in this moment of uncertainty, 1996 handover period. And I remember beginning, when I began the role, considering to take the role as well, was looking into that history. And what really emboldened me was really, it was rather than to be stuck within this kind of parameter of the X, Y, and Z that's kind of born from somewhere else onto things. Like, it's about nuance, you know, that is constantly in a bridge, you know. But also, I think, you know, to be brave, to maybe take these side steps, to question, to challenge, to critique for everything we do, and all these layers of you know, who we are and what the program and how we carry that. It's also, you know, it's amplified in the last few years, and I think it obfuscates some of the amazing work that we're doing. And it's just the first panel that we were on, but actually what happens is we are always talking to one another, sharing us, because we realize this kind of, you know, we each have this role somehow to
Solidarity.
Yeah, solidarity.
I just want to add that looking around to our files before, we've all come from elsewhere, each chosen to remain in Hong Kong. And Adeline, I was born there, but personally, I've been able to achieve the most, to do the most things being there. I think in collaboration with my peers and collaborators and coming at this solutions. But I love your point about nuance. I talk about that all the time. Yeah.
No, I mean, I agree that I think in life there's always something you can't talk about. You know, and I also feel like censorship is a living thing. What you can't talk about now, perhaps you can talk about later. And, you know, and it constantly moves with the times, right? So
the censorship is something that you see across the world. One of my other hats is that I'm the president of CMAN. And CMAN is the International Organization of Modern and Contemporary Art Museums. And we are 800 people. And we have one of the really important things that we do is Museum Watch, where we call out when things become, when it's wrong, actually. It's about when the art world, the contemporary and modern art world, individuals are under extreme stress.
And what's very clear is that it's everywhere.
It's not just in one place, but how that pressure is expressed is different depending on the location. And so cultural sensitivity is also really important when you speak, to understand what that means. And we need to be alert and careful about that as well.
Can we open it up to the public? Yeah? Questions, anyone? How do we do this? Will I give you the mic, or how do we do it? No? No? Lunch?
Thank you for this extraordinary, talk about each of the institutions, which of course we've known, but not understood in the way that each of you have now presented. So thank you very much. And I was just wanting to speak about, when we spoke about audiences and how we built, and we mentioned how the sort of auction houses in a way drew awareness, and then you spoke about how that value was sort of, to be assigned critical value rather than or historical value. I think all of those are so relevant because, those of us living here in this part of the world, also as an artist, I remember distinctly in the 80s that, the awareness around art here you grew when the auction houses came in. There was a lot more writing and publishing, and in Krishna, who just expired recently, passed away, and
his contribution. We sort of grew up reading about artists' lives back then, and yes, illustrated BT. And I mean, at that point, as a young student in school, I mean, that really meant that it opened up a new world for what artists' lives mean. And we are interested in art, but one didn't know what it meant to meet the like of an artist. And so, I mean, how these seeds shape you, not just as audiences, but as artists. And I mean, the extraordinary work at the ATP, I mean, I think it's a unique example of what you did, Suhanya. And I remember that, coming in the early years, and I haven't seen anything like it. There's no comparable example of the attention to audiences that range from little children, because the texts were written separately for little children at the lower level. I mean, I just felt that it was one of the most sort of diverse, and every taxi driver you spoke to knew about the ATT, and I think that's where the strength lies, where you can really move with everyone along. And it's extraordinary how you create space. I mean, like here, Mr. Savisatamabridge has done what he's done to this institution, or to make space, to make visible, either overlooked histories, or what you do with Parasite and Tai Kwun, so it's thank you very much. And or Dhawda Jil Art Museum, where Taski has been working, and or our galleries who have actually played that role in the absence of institutional spaces, which we often talk about, because as artists, the kind of platforms that were created by our galleries, who supported a very experimental practice that wouldn't otherwise be allowed to try. So yes, a big shout out to our galleries and for all the wonderful work they're doing. So, thank you.
Hi. Thank you guys for that. I think that brief history was super helpful, because I think it's making us all also think of our brief history here in Bombay and India more generally. And I think totally the galleries here and the art fairs, the India Art Fair team is also here. I wonder if Art Mumbai is represented. They've done a lot of the heavy lifting that traditionally institutions have done in other spaces over the last couple of decades, with the education and other things. But it's also making me think that if it's almost a necessary condition for the commercial things to come in first, to have to create space for artists to show before they make it to museums. I mean, there are spaces like Tai Kwun that give opportunities to very young artists as well, and spaces like Parasite that support them. But at some level, it's the galleries that have to do that hand-holding and head-lifting for a decade or two before things make it into the canon, or before there's enough body of work. They have to be supported for that period. And in the absence of galleries, in the absence of these commercial spaces, even the secondary market actually, which allow in some ways the galleries also to continue to do the work that they're doing, I think it's all part of a much more complex ecosystem. And it's almost these spaces, I wonder if they can even exist without those commercial things happening first, and setting the groundwork and creating a community of people who are willing to put money where their mouth is.
They respond to that because it's an interesting reflection to look at how Asia is approaching this, and maybe there are different models, because Asia has modernized caste, the middle class has grown rapidly, there has been a disposable income that have also flown through that. The support of the experiments, the artist, the creative maker has so in tandem to that, in a way that Europe and North America, very different history. So we have the opportunity to maybe develop a different way and be more responsive to those conditions on the ground. From my perspective at MCAS in Hong Kong, what I miss is seeing an equivalent institution in India.
it needs to happen. Because in the contemporary, modern and contemporary states, we need to have many institutions of scale and substance for this part of the world. We're over half of the world actually, with huge histories. And one institution cannot carry that alone. And we need different perspectives and points of view. So you're right to say you've already identified what's happening. We've got great biennales coming out of this part out of India. The commercial sector is great. The collector base is there. The money is there. There are major institutions like this one here in place. But for the modern and contemporary, it needs to happen. So it was very nice to hear Dr. Mukherjee say maybe there is a lobby happening to establish an institution towards that because it's necessary.
Comment to add to that, and we heard obviously the legacy parasite in terms of its history with lots of places internationally in terms of artist-run culture, the 60s and etc. But and also to mention that there are some people who have not started galleries, but with there's these also they had started nonprofits in Hong Kong, like the Archive, etc. And so I think it's an opportunity to now that this is established, really at the fair and whatnot, that the next step may be to open up a nonprofit entity because that does happen in different places. And I saw that a big one with galleries. Yes, I thought it was very great, but so like things that you'd normally see in a nonprofit residencies, and allowing an artist to be in situ for a long period of time. I mean that's real estate, right? And so I think that's important. And then to your question about artists, I think I can't speak for my colleagues, but as a curator, someone and a writer who supports artists. One reason that shifted jobs making is a way of identifying shifts in the ecology of what artists need. And for me, it was about, what would make an artist stay in Hong Kong after they graduated and they weren't getting, immediately an institution or show if there was only not enough nonprofits. Is it that we need to create different kinds of platforms that give stepping stones? So there are myself, but I know some of my colleagues, there are people thinking about how to thicken, develop ecology as things are already, the infrastructure is built. What next? We can happily serve and create what we already have to build a stronger model so we can be developed.
I think having worn many hats over my sort of 25 years or so of just being in the art world and having operated in, say, Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, and understanding quite a bit about what's going on across Asia, I will say that there is no hard and fast rule for Asia. Everybody's got to do things that fits their context, and the truth is, all of us don't wear one hat. We are all wearing multiple hats, whether you are a gallerist, traditionally, why would a gallery be hosting residencies? Why would a gallery be holding learning programs and all the rest of that? But you have to do it because you got to fill in the blanks, right? And this is really, I think, my hope for Bombay at least is to be able to see some further down the line, to see interesting contemporary spaces and also to have more spaces for artists to really think out loud, apart from artists, writers, because we always forget about the back end, right? The curators, what about registrars, what about things like even art handling? Because in order for an art ecosystem to survive, you have to think about the plumbing and all the rest of it, right? It's not just what's going on in your living room. So, I think, do you guys do you, don't copy anyone and work from the ground up. There are no rights and wrong. It's just got to feel right at the time, and it's got to feel right for the community. So, yeah.
Hi, Suhanya. I wanted to respond to what you said, that we really urgently need an institution similar to yours. We're going to have one in Delhi, of course, the KNMA. It's coming up very soon. But I think really the context has changed. And I'd like your response to that. That, in fact, because the world has changed, because the communication and we're in a different kind of space right now, that you can have little foundations, smaller spaces, and that is happening in Mumbai. We are doing the little that we do as an institution, but I feel the energy in Mumbai, where art is concerned, is amazing because it's happening in little spaces, tucked away, and it's a kind of guerrilla movement, And I think that there's a great energy to that and those connections. So I feel very much that the context has changed. That maybe, yes, you need a big space because you want to talk equally to the rest of the world in that sense. But in a sense, these other spaces are also leveraging a lot of influence,
Yeah, it's very fantastic to be here. We've been seeing so much in the last couple of days and felt that energy. The one thing I would say, I'm not saying don't do that. What the big public institution does is have the collection. And the collection is how you remember. Because without the collection, you can erase a memory. And that is a very dangerous thing to not remember. That's why I advocate for the institution. And I say this because I know from NPAS, the SIG collection of contemporary Chinese art, it is our Mona Lisa. The people that are coming, and especially those from the mainland, they come to see that collection. Because that collection can only be seen in hand form. And it's only an institution that can do that. That would be my response.
I would add quickly that there are exhibitions, but there's also publishing programs that we do, include the writing and the sharing and the knowledge building and the pop-up plumbing. We think a lot about translation of either existing canons or how can we create productive conversations and write them down and translate them and how do we distribute to share them with different kinds of publics, with international publics. So if they cannot travel there, then they start to understand why you're doing what we're doing. A personal practice is shifting to, doing different kinds of formats, like interviews, so you hear as directly as possible from artist, curator to the public. And these are kind of ways that I use personally, but I think institutionally too, that we're shape-shifting, kind of hoping in the moment
as needed to ensure long-term also about collection, conservation. I had artists tell me,
once a certain medium disappeared, like slides, for example, in my generation, she thought the whole generation, people couldn't find her work anymore. So I understand this idea of conservation, collection, the plumbing that you say is so significant.
Okay, I've been told last 2 questions. So this has been such a fascinating discussion, and I have had the privilege of leading the Asia Society Caravan early last year and had the privilege of visiting each of your institutions. RSI and plus Suhanya, you hosted us, which were so wonderful, and Tai Kwun, and meetings with Art Basel. But I can just reorient the conversation back to the elephant in the room that we touched upon briefly. I'm just curious, as institution leaders, there is a sort of a intersection between philanthropy, censorship, other sort of considerations. I don't think artists today hesitate to speak about a lot of these issues. I think artists are very forthcoming in the work that they do. But I think as institution leaders, we often have to exercise a certain amount of judging. I'm just curious as to how you do it in each of your individual capacities.
How much time do we have to answer this question?
Just 2 words: with care and integrity.
I'm giving away my trade secrets. No, I mean, as I was speaking with the conversation, we haven't mentioned artists that much. We're talking a lot about institutions, and that tends to happen a lot. Actually, we're kind of this. I think it's the town is a vacuum, and to listen, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we are here as well. There are. I mean, the elephant in the room. There are limits like that we can and cannot do, and I think that's why there's this greater urgency. And I mean, I've been really fascinated. I've learned so much about the guerrilla style or the kind of ecosystem, and attitude to art. In many ways they're indifferent to these bigger structures in a healthy way. And I think what we're trying to do with this panel maybe, what's coming through, is it's not either or. It's plus. It should be plus plus. And if we can't do something here, then we can do something over there. And to keep this going. But artists definitely need to listen more to, and in response to maybe this over reliance on commercial galleries, I think it's something also as an institution, right? We're trying to think much more about the before and after of an exhibition. So one of the great initiatives that we've had in the past is thinking about health insurance, for example, or during COVID, moments of work stocks, to actually release some to create a grants program to allow mobility to happen in that context, and that's something after COVID can be used to be a part of how we think.
Yeah, I mean, I think with care and the other one, which is there's always more than one way to skin the cat. So I think it's always about, do you want to grab the bull by the horns? Do you want to be, how do you want to address it, right? I think, there's never one answer, but I think Suhanya's two nuggets of wisdom with care is definitely the underlying factor that we need to adapt.
I agree with this idea of care, and maybe if it wasn't clear before, there are lots of it we have to abide by, different places. It's everywhere, it shifts. But it sounds very boring, but there's some very practical solutions in terms of the show, either on show, either with the, you have access to certain artists, or things aren't necessarily public conversations or what have you. But as much as possible, our charge is to facilitate artistic expression, but at the same time, to make a larger collection, need for a smaller collection. People make art for a multitude of different reasons, and we're kind of in charge of all of that, and have to sort of shift our, how we address things, and to, like I said, to kind of meet the moment, and I think the pace by pace basis. But I think that we try to do it with the most integrity that we can, and the fact that we're still here, we're still open, and we're able to and do as much as we can with what we have. It's a testament to that commitment and to that integrity.
I would just also add, never give up.
Okay, at the final question, Our Lady of it.
Hi. A question to you, Billy Tang. Eva, you mentioned artists collect. You started as an artist-led institute collective, and then grew into an institution. And you see this a lot in the West, where there are so many artist-led collectives that spring up. And on the other hand, you guys mentioned that there's no one model, no one way for the ecology to bloom. I wonder, in your experience, what you have felt and how important what you guys did was to the ecology, and whether that started off other artist collectives. That's question one. And question two, what do you suppose the ecology currently in Bombay, for example, can do to sort of, give it heat?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Maybe just throw in the air some keywords to be. I think a lot about. As you mentioned, we evolved from being artist-driven or artist-led, artist-centric, to thinking about curatorial models that contextualize, to add new frameworks, or to constellate where we are and how possibilities can emerge in a collaborative way, or with many colleagues, particularly in the region. I think a lot now about, does it have to be or and how to embrace more of the fluid understanding of this. And I think that precisely comes from what you mentioned as well, the legacy that we have as a collective, were founded by a collective. And this collective actually was a loose collective in many ways. They had their own individual practices, and they would slide into moments where, because of a lack of infrastructure, there wasn't any museums that there are now today. The most immediate way to do things is to get together, but it's the stress of that, and how you can keep the momentum going. That's what's driven, our evolution. And I think a lot about, and then another thing that we discussed today in the conversation is solidarity with the different ways of working, the different scales, but also across our borders, and I think to challenge before this. And so I think there's this kind of third dimension that I'm thinking a lot about in terms of, everything we do could be a preposition of what does it mean to be a collective or to collectivize, or even the model of an institution. So last year, for example, we collaborated with Art Labor. It was their first institution show, but it really was to challenge this separation of solo and group, monographic, polyphonic. It was also a way in the context of Vietnam where it's extremely hard now to sustain things. Someone might look at Facebook and decide to close that or to cancel something. And constantly kind of working in that context, I think, has allowed their guerrilla movement that I think challenges how we operate and how we move adjacent to different communities. And and I think that was just in one question that we had in the process, was to think, if you have the chance of some kind of model, in Saigon or in Vietnam in general, this could be a stepping stone to that, to actualize the keep mobility goal in artist speech from here and there, to also support people to be thinking about this idea. It's kind of how we think a lot about this, yeah. But yeah.
So on that note, bosses, we wrap up? Yes. On that note, thank you very much for your time, and most of all, thank you, our fellow speakers, with sweet and wonderful to have this with you. Hi everyone, I just want to do a formal thank you to Pooja, Mr. Mukherjee, the museum, for having us back like bad pennies every year, and we be back again. Thank you to our sponsors, India Art Fair, who couldn't make this happen without you, and thank you for your generosity to allow us to bring everyone here to Bombay. Thank you, of course, to Suhanya, Ingrid, Billy, and Adi, and to Shireen and her amazing team, Apil and everyone else who puts the whole thing together. I know I'm digging on your lunch, so just one last thing, there's a walkthrough with Dayanita Singh, which starts at 2:30, and Pooja Vesh in the museum, and lunch is served, so thank you very much.